something crazy happened. Something crazy happened. And I never thought I would see this. And we need to ask, why is this happening? Donald Trump appeared on the All In podcast. If you guys are not familiar with this podcast, this is, I think it's like 4 or 5 billionaires. David Sachs is one of the commentators on this podcast. It's like him and his tech bros. And they brought on pretty big name guests. I mean, this podcast really blew up pretty quickly because, again, like David Sachs is a billionaire. So it's not like they did not have the resources to do what they needed to do. But Donald Trump did appear on here. And the section that I want to focus on is the part about immigration, because believe it or not, according to this interview, Donald Trump has flipped on immigration. And I'm really curious to see how Donald Trump supporters are going to feel about this. And number 2, do you believe he's being honest about this, or you just feel he's just saying what they want to hear? Let's get into this part here.
I know you're running out of time here, so we haven't had a chance for you to speak to the border situation yet. So I want to give you a chance to address that, because that's always been really one of your main issues since 2016. You wanted to build a wall. The Democrats did everything they could to thwart that. You built the wall, but then Biden left a bunch of holes in it and then sold off the parts for scrap metal. And now we've had and repealed your executive orders. So I want to give you a chance to speak to that. But one piece I want to just add in as a follow-up question is, a lot of tech CEOs say, if we fix the border, can we get more H-1Bs for tech workers? So can you address that as well as what's going on at the border?
Yes, so we built hundreds of miles of wall, David, as you know, and we're very proud of it. We did it as per specification by the Border Patrol. They wanted exactly the wall that we did, with the climb paddle on top, with steel, concrete, and then rebar, and all of the things that they wanted to have vision through it, clearly through it. And because I thought about concrete plank, frankly, going up 40 or 50 feet, and they didn't like that. They wanted to have vision through, and I understood that too. I sort of disagreed with it, but that's okay. We actually brought climbers in, Mount Everest climbers to climb, and we built a very hard wall to climb. It's a very effective wall. And we built hundreds of miles, and then we're going to add quite a bit at the very end. And we bought about 200 additional miles, and it was ready to be put up. Could have been put up in 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. And areas that were rough areas that were people coming in, because as you build the wall, they go in different areas, right? They go further out. It was so effective. It was so effective. Mexico gave us a lot of troops for free because of a certain negotiation that I had with them. You heard that. But it was so effective, the wall. But Biden, they didn't want to put up those slats that were going up routinely by us. That means you had gaps. You had, as an example, you had gates in certain area that we put up. We were going to put up big, powerful gates that we could open, and you could let equipment through, et cetera, if you needed it. And they got rid of everything. They sold it for 5 cents on the dollar, much of it, 5 cents on the dollar. I said, I can't believe it. And that's the first time that I said they're serious. They actually want open borders. They want an open border. Nobody could believe it. I couldn't believe it. Because I never believed they wanted an open border, because who would be stupid enough to want an open border? Look what's happened with an open border.
He said open border like, 4 or 5 times? I just want to remind everyone that Joe Biden actually continued building onto Trump's border wall. So when it comes to immigration, when it comes to the border, both parties, they lie about this. Both parties are not 100% honest about how they're handling this situation.
I was very proud of that. We had the safest border in the history of our country. And now we have the worst border in the history of the world. We had a safe border. I had a remain in Mexico policy, catch and release in Mexico, not in the United States. Everything was so good. But the remain in Mexico was a big deal. Not easy to get, but it was a big deal. They were in Tijuana, hundreds of thousands of people. They had to be approved to come into our country. And now you look at what's happened. We've been overrun. It's an invasion of our country by people. Many people come out of jails and prisons. They come out of mental institutions, insane asylums, and we have terrorists coming into our country at a level that we've never seen before. It's a very sad.
I never understood why the wall was so controversial. You know, every country needs to have a border, and a wall is a really good way to enforce a border. I never understood why they were so animated about stopping you from building the wall after you ran on that issue in 2016. They held you up for years with litigation. And then, like you said, they wouldn't just finish the little pieces of it, and they left big holes in it. And I think you're right. The only conclusion is they want an open border. I mean, how else do you explain it?
Let me pause here for a second, because there's this focus on the wall. And what I think is often left out is that walls don't keep people out. People find other ways to get in. We've talked about the airports before on this show. When people talk about immigration and they talk about who is a citizen and a legal immigration, all that kind of stuff, a lot of people, and I know it has changed, I would say over the past year, but a lot of people during Trump's administration, a lot of the people that did not have legal immigration status, a lot of those people were people that overstayed their visas, that came into the United States via airplane, not through the Mexico border. So I've tried to explain this to people so many times, is that walls don't keep people out. People will find a way to get in. Because, like, ask people that have lived in countries where they've had a wall. Some of you may remember when East Berlin and West Berlin were separated by a big giant wall. People still found ways to get through. So there's that. There's a lot of money spent on something that people are going to find a way around, as if a wall is going to prevent everybody from coming. It doesn't. It doesn't. There are other ways to get into the country.
Want to destroy our country. You know, the fact is, it's incredible. The big mistake I made, I should have said, I will not build a wall. We do not want a wall. And that wall would have gone up in 15 minutes.
The more important point, I think, Mr. President, is we need high-skilled workers in this country.
Yes.
We need to recruit the best and brightest from the world. Every time we get somebody super intelligent from India or Europe, any country, that's
3 of us are immigrants, sir.
Yeah, and 3 of the 4 here are immigrants, the ones without the ties. And we can get these great people into our country.
Pause. This gentleman here, when he is speaking about highly skilled workers, I want you to understand who they are speaking to and who they are speaking for. These are the tech bros. Okay, so David Sacks and his buddies, they're tech bros. The Silicon Valley dudes, that's what they are. So when he says highly skilled workers, and he said, I would get workers from India and stuff, that's because in the tech industry, a lot of times they are trying to recruit workers that are internationals. That is not a secret for those who live in tech spaces, right? So I live in the Boston area, Massachusetts. Boston is number 2 with startups after Silicon Valley. So we have the most startups after Silicon Valley. There's a lot of tech companies here. Part of that has to do with MIT. So a lot of these tech companies, they typically want to hire internationals for those jobs. I kid you not. If you go, you can go into any of these organizations and you see it. You see it, right? So when he says we need highly skilled workers, he's speaking for himself, like literally for himself. Him and David Sacks and all of them, they're speaking for the tech industry. Don't forget that. Let me let it continue.
And that's a loss for our adversaries and our competitors, and it's a gain for us. But I've never heard you talk about this. Can you please promise us you will give us more ability to import the best and brightest around the world to America?
I do promise, but I happen to agree. That's why I promise. Otherwise, I wouldn't promise. Let me just tell you that it's so sad when we lose people from Harvard, MIT, from the greatest schools and lesser schools that are phenomenal schools also. And what I wanted to do, and I would have done this, but then we had to solve the COVID problem because that came in and, sort of dominated for a little while, as you perhaps know. But what I want to do and what I will do is you graduate from a college, I think you should get automatically as part of your diploma a green card.
Pause. This is the flip. Now, see, I was working in higher ed during Trump's administration. I remember when the HB1 visa changed under his administration. And I remember a lot of my students having difficulty finding jobs in Boston or even in the Boston area because of the policy that was put in place under his administration. So a lot of those students that were internationals had to go back home. And it wasn't that they couldn't get a job because they weren't smart, they're not intelligent enough, they weren't highly skilled. It was because of the policy that was put in place under Trump's administration, which I'll read to you directly from his administration's website, that change. So now he's saying something different. Let me let him continue.
Be able to stay in this country. And that includes junior colleges too. Anybody graduates from a college, you go in there for 2 years or 4 years. If you graduate or you get a doctorate degree from a college, you should be able to stay in this country. And you know more stories than I do, but I know of stories where people graduated from a top college or from a college, and they desperately wanted to stay here. They had a plan for a company, a concept, and they can't. They go back to India, they go back to China, they do the same basic company in those places, and they become multi-billionaires employing thousands and thousands of people, and it could have been done here. And a bigger example is you need a pool of people to work for your companies. You have great companies, and they have to be smart people. Not everybody can be less than smart. You need brilliant people. And we force the brilliant people, the people that graduate from college, the people that are number one in their class from the best colleges, you have to be able to recruit these people and keep the people.
But you were the reason why they could not keep and retain those people. We'll come back to the video in just a second. I want to show you what happened under his administration, because I don't want people to forget about this, just in case people forgot. Because I had, working at MIT, working at BU, a lot of the students are international students. So I had students from China, from Korea, from India, great students, excellent grades, highly skilled, as they're saying in that video, but could not get jobs here because this happened under Trump's administration. See, people forget. The Trump administration is taking action to tighten foreign worker visa requirements and protect American workers. And we can go right down to this part here. It says the Trump administration announced 2 interim final rules to dramatically improve the H-1B work visa program. Go on here. DHS is tightening standards to require that foreign workers show specialized merit to establish their eligibility. DHS is also taking action to rein in shadow third-party employers who use the HB1 program to displace American workers and to reduce the validity period for H-1Bs used by these shadow employers, which will ensure more frequent vetting for compliance with H-1B program requirements. Let's go down to this part right about here. Putting American workers first. President Trump is committed to making sure American workers are not disadvantaged by foreign labor. Goes on here. President Trump knows that H-1B visas should only be reserved for specialized talent that helps support a strong economy. Here's the problem we ran into, though. What was happening when students were trying to get those jobs? And these are companies that recruit at these schools all the time, whether it's MIT or BU, it was the same employers that would come to these schools, right? So they were used to recruiting these students. All of a sudden, students that had excellent grades, that had the merit, had internships, did everything they needed to do. And even some of those that are coming from the master degree programs, whereas before they would have been able to get a job at those companies. Those companies were taking some of these students maybe to the first, the second round of interviews and not letting them make it to the final round of interviews, because what was happening is a lot of those companies, particularly some of those tech companies, they said, well, wait a minute, if we have an American applicant, we have to put them first. So what happened was a lot of those international students that had the skills that David Sacks and his bros are looking for did not get those job opportunities because this was put in place. I talked to these students one-on-one in my office. one-on-one. And I watched them get rejected after rejection after rejection after rejection, even for entry-level positions. It got to the point where I had a couple of students where they took jobs that were way below their pay grade just so they can get the work visa and then work their way up in the United States. I had never seen that before. I'd worked in higher ed for over 11 years. So this happened under his administration. Earlier today, I was talking about Julian Assange and all the people who were saying on social media, well, Trump would have pardoned Julian Assange. He could have done that during his presidency. But it was like all of a sudden, all these people forgot that it was under Trump's administration that Julian Assange was kidnapped. All of a sudden, everybody has brain fog. How quickly people forget. Because everybody's looking for a hero. And what you have to understand is that none of these politicians are going to save you. Nobody is coming to save you. I haven't said that on the show in a while. We have to save each other. So it's just how quickly and easily people can forget because they want that hero. So this piece here. President Trump knows that H-1B students' visas, should be reserved for specialized talent that helps support a strong economy. For too long, this program has been misused as an expensive labor program, replacing American jobs in the process. These critical reforms will improve the quality of the H-1B program without changing the annual statutory cap for H-1B visas. The Trump administration is closing loopholes that have allowed employers in the U.S. to replace American workers with low-cost foreign labor. The problem is this was seen in the professional sector as well. So companies like McKinsey, Deloitte, I don't know if everybody knows who these companies are, but these are the companies that will recruit. McKinsey, like the consulting firms, McKinsey, Deloitte, I think BGB, maybe BGB. These companies that were constantly recruiting at those schools that I worked at, it was like all of a sudden, it was like very few job offers coming out because the reality is a lot of the schools, particularly in this area, do have a lot of international students. So there's that. And another thing I want to tell you that some people don't like to hear and don't want to admit, unfortunately, a lot of these jobs, they are looking for particular math and science skills. And you know what I can tell you when I look at math and science skills in the United States is that when you compare the education system to some of the other countries abroad, students in the US are behind. A lot of the students here do not have advanced math and science skills. This is why you don't see as many American students accepted into some of these elite academic institutions that are going into the math and science fields. That's why when you go to some of those schools, you're like, well, why is all the math and science fields all international students? Because they take advanced math and science classes. It's required in their country. It's not required here. It's sad, but it's the reality. And I'm just being raw with you. It's true. We need a lot of help with STEM in this country. So if you want more American, workers to be able to have those jobs in the tech industry, then we're going to have to improve the education system here, particularly when it comes to STEM. We'll go on a little bit more here. So now you see he's changing his mind on this. Let's continue.
It was such a big deal. Somebody graduates at the top of the class. They can't even make a deal with the company because they don't think they're going to be able to stay in the country. That is going to end on day one.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think we all wholeheartedly agree with that. Being in the tech industry, we understand the importance of that. They're telling us.
See?
So you have to go to dinner, Mr. President. So thank you so much for spending so much time with us. We really appreciate it.
And then he had to go there. But do you see what I'm saying? So let me point out something else from this podcast that someone may not have told you if you saw this elsewhere. You guys do know that David Sachs over here in the upper right-hand corner, he donated to Donald Trump's campaign. Let me say this again. David Sachs in the upper right-hand corner donated to Donald Trump's campaign. He also donated to, he held a fundraiser, for Donald Trump. He also held a fundraiser for RFK, and he hosted a fundraiser for Ro Khanna. So I don't know what's happening there. But Dave's all over the place. Dave is just spreading his money out. Dave is spreading his money out like he had a poker table. So you have to know who people are talking to. What did I tell you? Always follow the money. Yeah, Donald Trump is on that podcast, but you need to know also why he probably went on that podcast. It's a big club, fam, and we're not in it. This is what I was trying to tell Judge Joe Brown. Instead of focusing on who someone wants to date or how they want to dress and all that stuff, that's not things we need to really pay attention to. This is what we need to focus to. You got a billionaire club right here on the screen, fam. These are all billionaires. That means they exploit labor. That means they exploit workers. There is no such thing as a self-made billionaire. I've covered that on this show multiple times. So you got one big billionaire club right there. And then you have a presidential candidate on the screen with the billionaires, and the billionaires are asking the president to help their business. Do you see how it becomes personal? They don't do anything for poor and working class people. They help the rich. Billionaires help other billionaires.